When people ask me for how long I planned this journey, I usually answer 2 months. And this is the actual truth. But when I look at these pictures I drew as a child and that are commented by my mother on these pink post-its, I believe that I planned this journey for much longer than 2 months. And I believe I already planned this journey my whole life long.
Yeah. Vem comigo, vem. Vem comigo, vem. Yeah, yeah. Vem comigo, vem. Vem. Bota sua mão em cima da minha. Vou mostrar que tu não tá sozinha. Bora que o mundo é nosso. Vambora que o mundo é nosso. Bota sua mão em cima da minha. Vou mostrar que tu não tá sozinha. Bora que o mundo é nosso. Vambora que o mundo é nosso. Acordar pra ver a luz do sol. Teu olhar o brilho intenso de um farol. Não deixa apagar, vem ver. Não deixa apagar, vem ver. Mesmo quando o dia anoitecer, a luz do luar também é pra você. Vim te convidar pra ver. Vim te convidar pra ver. Andar, correr de mãos dadas. Sei lá, sentar na calçada. Só pra brincar de viver. O tempo passar e a gente parar pra ver. Você é marcha perfeita. Vem cá que a gente se ajeita. No mais é só me abraçar. Se alguém gritar, você deixa pra lá e bota tua mão em cima.
Now we have contact in the government. Or maybe a little bit more.
Hello and welcome. I am incredibly happy to finally make this presentation, to finally talk about the voyage I have been doing in between the year of 2019 and 2021. And I'm using therefore, as mentioned, a presentation that I did in Swiss German in several sailing clubs. And now I just adapted it a little bit to make this as a YouTube video, but the base basically is still a PowerPoint presentation. So I would really like to explain a bit more about my voyage in general that I did starting in 2019 on a 26-foot sailing catamaran from James Wharram design. And therefore I just introduce you to a little map that shows a bit the most important stops I did within this 30 months journey. We are gonna sail to Morocco, where I nearly lost my boat, continue to the Canary Islands, where I had to do an improvised engine repair, sail to Cabo Verde, where I found out where the green actually comes from. There will be a reunion of two brothers in the Senegal, a lot of hippos in the Gambia, an unspoiled island archipelago in front of Guinea-Bissau. We're gonna find the so-called Big Island in Brazil, talk about the rainforest in French Guiana, found an incredible underwater world on the Windward Islands, bachata on the Dominican Republic, boat building in Haiti, a rather unknown side of Cuba, and I'm going to prepare for a solo transatlantic on the Bahamas. We're going to sail across the Atlantic, second time found the highest mountain of Portugal on the Azores, and of course a lot more. But before I bring you to all these tropical destinations, I would like to take you a little bit back in time to Luzern in the heart of Switzerland, where this journey started 3 years ago in the spring of 2019. This is the very first photo of this trip, and it is showing Wayan, the mentioned sailing catamaran from Wharram design, a Tiki 26, my house, my home for the upcoming 30 months. It doesn't look like a sailing catamaran or a sailing boat at all at the moment. It is because it is still on a street trailer here in Switzerland, ready to departure to the Mediterranean Sea by road. It is an unusual boat to do such a long journey for sure, but this idea to sail exactly with this boat doesn't come from far away. And to explain this, we have to jump even a bit further back in time. You see the same boat, Wayan, here again on Lake Luzern in Switzerland. This boat was bought by my father almost 20 years ago, and we used it as a boat to make family holidays. We're a family of 6, so we would all fit in or on this boat. My parents in the central cabin, and me and my siblings, 2 of them each in each hull. And for me, who learned sailing on the Swiss lakes, on sailing dinghies, this was the first opportunity to also go sailing on the ocean, on the sea, on the Mediterranean Sea mostly. Actually, only on the Mediterranean Sea, in Italy and in the south of France. So, therefore, I already knew when I came closer to the voyage I'm now going to tell about, I knew that I wanted a similar boat like this, a simple boat, a small boat, something similar like this Tiki 26 Wayan. So my search started looking for other Tiki 26 boats, and I actually found one in Greece, showed it to my father, the advertisement for it, and asked whether he think this would be a suitable boat. And his answer came quite quick, saying that I just should take Wayan to go for this voyage. And I was incredibly happy for this offer. And of course, I didn't have to think long. And so it came that I started with Wayan. And I think this is important to mention at the beginning of this presentation, that I had this huge privilege. One of the reasons many people cannot go sailing is for sure that they do not have a boat. And for me, it was so easy. I had this huge luck that I could just take our family boat to go sailing. And not only that I could take my family's boat, but that also that I got all the support from my family to go sailing. They were all behind the idea and supported me from the beginning on. Therefore, my father also came with me to Marseille, the south of France, to take the boat from the trailer and build it up. And here you can already see a bit the peculiarity of this ship. It doesn't really look like all the other boats on this dry yard, as you can see on the side or in the background. And this not just because it is much smaller than all the other boats, and also because it has 2 hulls, so therefore it's a catamaran. And also special for a catamaran that you can actually take it apart, how you see it now being put together. There are these 3 really important so-called cross beams that hold the boat together. They are, like the boat, built out of wood, and they build the structural part of the boat. There are many other catamarans that are built like this, with these cross beams, but a really speciality about Wharram designs are that these beams not bolted to the deck, but only ropes are used to connect the beams to the boat itself. This has the huge advantage that you can actually take the boat apart and put it on a trailer, as you saw, but it also offers that the forces, the stresses that are put on the structure of the boat are dampened by the ropes. They take the stress slowly away and don't disturb it in the boat. This is actually not a completely new idea. It's an incredibly old idea of the earliest sailors of this world. It comes from the traditional Polynesian sailing canoes, and this design, this idea of building boats was inspiration, if not the base, for James Wharram boat design. James Wharram is an English man, and he was a pioneer in offshore catamaran design. And this is now his Tiki 26 model, Wayan, the boat I sailed with, how it looks like if it's fully set up and ready to sail. It already looks like a boat, like a sailing boat, not like it looked back on the trailer, but it still is a special sailing boat. It still has a bit from the ideas of these Polynesian sailing canoes. You can see mainly the hulls that are quite narrow compared to nowadays catamaran design. On the other hand, it's also different, as you for sure could tell from the other picture that I showed before from the canoes. It is, of course, adapted to modern day time and also modern day building materials. One of the important ideas of James Wharram was also that the boat would not only be really simple, but also that it would be simple to build and simple to maintain. And therefore he chose plywood to make the boat building. Therefore you don't need a negative, a mold to build the boat like you would use nowadays with most other boats. You can actually just start in your backyard, start cutting the plywood sheets and build your own boat. This is the idea of James Wharram. You can build it using his plans that also describe which material you have to use, when you have to use it. It is supposed to be as easy as IKEA instructions. So this is the basic fundament of this design, and people who are sailing boats like this are usually referred as KISS sailors. KISS in this case stands for Keep It Simple Stupid. This was the motto that was always with me when sailing. A big advantage of this boat, as I see it, is the huge outside space. Compared to the boat size of just 26 feet, it offers a lot of space on the trampoline in front, also on the side, and the cockpit is quite spacious. On the other hand, a drawback, you have really limited space inside. You have mainly the central cabin and the hulls that you can go in, that you access via a sliding hatch. There's no headroom in any of these places, and as you now can see in the middle cabin, this is how the middle cabin looks like if it's tiny and organized. You will see later in a video that this is not always the case. I usually refer to this place as the saloon. Nowadays on catamarans you usually call this area the saloon, but usually you would have a big kitchen, a bar, sofas and so on. It's a bit kept more simple, but you still have a bed. If you're not longer than 180, it even fits you. You can use this either as a guest bed. Sometimes we sailed 3 people, mostly 2. But also when I was sailing alone, I used this place to get a night watch. And you see on the right side the kitchen, and on the left side there is mainly the water and the food supply, or the fresh food supply. But as I mentioned, no headroom, and here not even sitting height inside there. It is really a boat for the tropicals. Like if it's cold, as it was on this picture, you see my father on the right still with the hat on. So if it's cold, it's not the most enjoyable boat. This is inside the hull. We're looking to the bow of the boat. You're seeing my bed here actually. If you lift the bed, you come into the bilge that you can use for all the storage of food and water. And the really beautiful thing on this boat is this bilge is always perfectly dry and clean, since there are no through hulls, there is no engine inboard. So this is really good storage place that nothing turns bad. If we now on this position turn 180 degrees, looking to the stern, it will look like this. This is my friend Dominic, who joined me from the first part of this voyage. And you can see that we used one of these boards from the floor that are over the bilge. You can take it out and use it as a table. It's showing a bit the different multifunctionalities on this boat. So now the most interesting part, how does this boat actually sail? And I think therefore I'm just going to show you a video from the first sailing we did, starting in Marseille, sailing to the Balearic Islands of Spain.
Willkommen an Bord vom Wayan. Halber Wind. Das ist geil. Fahrt 6 Knöpfe direkt Richtung Menorca. Erstes Rebbild nicht ganz so gross. Der Toni super am Steuern. Sieht cool aus. Dominik kommt auch noch führen, vielleicht hat er sogar noch ein schnelles Wort.
So I think you were able to see different things now on this video, also a bit about the day-to-day life on a boat while sailing. You saw the central cabin, how it actually looks like if it's not tidy and organized. But you also saw or see now the hatches that lead to the side. Here Dominic coming out of the hull, and you can see that it can be a challenge in, well, if it's raining basically, or if you have big waves, you have to really well time the moment to come out of this hatch. What I was commenting in Swiss German, you either understand or otherwise, I'm going to repeat this now. We were doing around 6 knots, and the mainsail and the jib both were reefed in the first reef, and the wind pilot in the back was steering. Actually, nearly all the steering of this voyage was done by this wind pilot, Pacific Light. It doesn't need any battery, it just powers by the, or just steers by the direction of the wind, all mechanical. This was maybe also a special crossing, since it was the first crossing I did on this boat alone. Usually I would do this with my father, so for the first time it was like only my responsibility to keep this boat well, and for sure the first crossing, this feeling, maybe even a bit oppressive feeling, was for sure the biggest, since it would be really embarrassing doing a mistake on the first leg. So the longer I sailed, the more I could handle this responsibility, the more also I knew how the boat behaves, what it can handle and what not. So it became more and more also enjoyable. This picture I used to explain the navigation instruments I have on the boat. As you can see, I have a compass on the right side, which shows me the direction, and I have the sky showing me the direction using the sun and the stars. I think this picture mostly shows what I do not have. I have no plotter, no wind instruments, I don't use radar or log. What I use, of course, is GPS, since it's so easy nowadays to have and use GPS. I had it on my phone, I had it on tablets, my guests always had it too. So I think this is something wonderful, easy to use nowadays. You have applications that you can download and just use it like you would use Google Maps on the street. So this is something that made cruising for sure different, and also, well, basically much easier. So even we didn't have all of these fancy instruments. We made it safe and sound to the Balearic Islands, and you see the red line. This is our route, and we mostly visited the northern coasts, and we were really surprised by the Balearic Islands. I had the expectations that it would be mostly a party island, how you know the names, Ibiza and maybe Palma. And it was also early in the year, so there was not much tourism yet, and we discovered an incredibly beautiful side of this island. Like this photo for sure shows, you see Wayan here in a really shallow lagoon on Formentera in the south of Ibiza. It's probably my favorite photo from this time. And it also was great because we did not have to share this bay with someone else. Most boats just couldn't enter. The depth was around 0.5 meter, and Wayan's draft is only 0.4 meters. So this is maybe also a great advantage of a small boat, or especially a small catamaran. After the Balearic Islands, we sailed more or less straight through the Strait of Gibraltar, and when sailing with a small boat here, it is really crucial that you have the good timing to sail in the Atlantic. Since the Atlantic is 2 meters higher than the Mediterranean, you usually have a water flow going into the Mediterranean, making an escape into the Atlantic tricky. So you have to use the good times, the good tides that can help you to reach the Atlantic waters. We were incredibly lucky here. We arrived perfectly on time. There is like a window of 6 hours a day that you can do this, or 3 hours each. And We sailed here nearly with no sails because there was so much easterly wind. We used mostly the mast and a little bit of jib and did like 4 knots against really short and steep waves. I think this is the trickiest part since you always have a bit of current against. So this was, at least for a small boat like that, the biggest thing to handle. Not the wind, but the waves. The good thing about the Strait of Gibraltar is that it is really short. Like in good weather conditions, you can see from the southern tip of Europe to the southern tip of Africa, and Morocco just waits around the corner. It takes literally only several hours to reach there. And this also was a big milestone on my journey, since it was also a bit of a point of no return. Not no return, but if you look at the wind map, you see the Strait of Gibraltar in the complete northeast, where there is the orange wind pattern, and this is how the wind is most of the time. You have in Gibraltar either easterly or westerly winds, and around across the Atlantic coast of Morocco you have northern winds. So I knew when I crossed the strait and sail south, I will have a hard time to go back the same way to north against the wind. So it really was a decision. I really want to do it. And I was a bit anxious about this moment before, but when I was there, I knew it is what I want to do. I want to go south. I want to really start and go into this voyage. So it was a great feeling. To sail Morocco is beautiful. It's an incredibly beautiful country. On the other hand, it's super bureaucratically and it's complicated sometimes to do the entry and the exit. In each port you have to clear in and clear out. You get a lot of passport stamps. And also there is a ban to anchor anywhere. You can really only use the port infrastructure, and you're also depending on the port infrastructure. In this port here there was horrible water inside because all the fish waste was thrown in, so it didn't really invite to go bathing. But of course there are other marinas like the one in Rabat or the one in Tanger, and they have modern marinas, how we know them around the world. And also the great thing about these places are that they have incredibly good connections to the whole country, and it was for us a perfect starting point to make a trip to first Marrakesh in the inland and from then to the Atlas Mountains. And we spent several days in these mountains and valleys. We had time to see these classicals, Mercedes taxis, really indestructible. Or back at the coast, even more traditional, this classic picture of Morocco. As I said, there are differences in the infrastructure. This is further south in Essaouira. You have around 2 meters of tides here, and if your boat has a freeboard of around 1 meter, it gives you a hard time to leave and enter the boat at a low tide, as you can see on this picture. And therefore, after spending not even 1 day here, we asked the harbour master whether it is possible that we could just anchor in front of the harbour. He was not easy to be convinced, but we succeeded in the end. And we were allowed to anchor in front of Essaouira, in front of the beach, the harbour in the background. You can actually hardly see Wayan here in the middle right part of the picture. There was never rain, but always this dust in the air if you're close to the coast. We enjoyed beautiful days at the anchorage there, and till this happened. If you look at this rope, you may find out what it was used for. There are these plump parts in the middle of the cord, which are used to make the line heavier. So this was used as an anchor rope, and of course it should not look like this. We were incredibly lucky on one hand, since we were on the boat when this rope broke. We first didn't realize we were sleeping, so we were just drifting outside and suddenly waking up because this boat started to shake. We opened the hatch to look around and we didn't see the familiar coast, but we just saw open ocean. And of course this is like a huge shock. I ran in front, tried to get the anchor up. I thought it's just drifting. or the anchor was dragging at the seabed. But when I got the line in, this was awaiting me. There was no anchor anymore. And so we had to set sail back to the coast and put the second anchor. And with this shock, we were not really able to sleep. Luckily, the next day, as you can see here, was incredibly calm. We had time to rethink what happened wrong in this night, what didn't we think. And it's not a big secret, many of you will already know. If you use only rope to anchor, you should always use a chain leader just to prevent the chafing on the ground, since we did not see the ground, how it was, what kind of, if it was sand, if it was rock, what the consistency of the seabed. We just hoped there was nothing bad there, and this of course can lead to this chafing over time, and also that the rope then failed in the end. So it's a lesson learned. I will never forget to use chain. Here you see the coast of Morocco and all our stops, Essaouira in the middle of the map. And here we took the decision to straight sail to the Canary Islands. This is a rather typical decision sailor take. The reason behind that is that we have this northeast winds, and it would have been nice to sail down further in the south in Morocco, but I decided to cross already here to the Canary Islands, since it would be easier with the wind from behind. The further down we went, the more we risked that we have crosswinds and waves. So it was mainly a strategical reason to do this. And decisions like this are not so uncommon. Sailing looks like it is the ticket to freedom, and I for sure agree with this, but I also have to mention that it can limit. There are places that you cannot reach with the boat. You can reach them, but you cannot anchor there, since the coast is too steep, or there are rocks on the ground, or just too much waves. It can be that there is no wind. You can also not sail. It can be that you're in the bad season at the wrong place. This is all factors that limit you while sailing, and I think if you do a sailing voyage, you should be aware of this. There is, well, one thing that you can do against this is if you bring a lot of time, you can just wait for the good conditions. This is how I usually did it. Having no big engine on the boat, I could not continue my voyage without wind. And all these factors, I think, are also beautiful. On the other hand, since you are already, or it already takes some decisions away from you. You don't have to decide in between all options. All these factors limit you, and they take a lot of decisions away from you. But the options you leave with are still more than enough to choose from, in my opinion. And also it led to beautiful situations. We spent more time in places we never planned to stay at all, had a wonderful time there. And I think this is also what makes sailing unique. I thank you so much for watching this very first part of this presentation. In the next part, we continue on the Canary Islands. I hope you enjoyed, and I see you on part 2.